Welcome to the Anatomy of a Founder podcast. And we're really excited to have you. And before we start and go into your story and business, I would like to ask whether anything interesting or fascinating has happened to you this week.
Well, thank you for having me. Interesting or fascinating? I just got back from a really interesting meeting with the NHS counter-fraud team. For context, we're giving government a couple of teams for 6 months to go try and do a big project, save some money. And it is kind of wild to me that the government loses 50 to 100 billion a year. And for context, the UK government budget is $1 trillion a year. They lose 50 to 100 billion to fraud every single year. And it is wildly outdated how they're trying to tackle it. So just went to look at how NHS counter-fraud is functioning. And they lose about 1.5 billion a year to fraudsters in the NHS. From all these different interesting sources. So hopefully we're going to give them a team, get access to some good data, and hopefully save the country, $1 billion or $2 billion, which would be nice, put that back into the NHS. So that was my weird and wonderful kind of, start of the week.
Was that this morning? Or?
That was, I literally got out of a cab from this morning.
Gotcha.
And also the last 10 minutes of the meeting, there was a bomb scare, alarm thing. Mm-hmm. We all rushed out the building and I was like, this is wild. This is like so interesting.
Okay, so you're riding on that adrenaline high now from one meeting
too
to
hyped
another.
up from the bomb scare. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, well, that said, do you want to kind of go into what Cleo is all about, how that works and where you've come with it?
Yeah, so like the brief context, we're 10 years into building the business almost. I think our 10-year birthday party is at the end of this year in November, which is very exciting. The backstory is I was a computer scientist, studied machine learning at uni, went and did a master's, and then worked as a data scientist for a year before I started Cleo. And the problem I was always trying to solve was working in fintech and financial services. All of the customers had the same problem. They were pushed an enormous amount of credit by their bank, given no help, couldn't manage their money, low financial literacy. So I thought this is like one of the biggest societal systemic problems. And if you're going to turn around this, the rise in populism, and if we're going to get people back to like a healthier, happier Western society, you need to sort this out. People need to be wealthier. People need to close that income inequality gap, which is huge. So that was kind of like the founding mission, and it's just been all over the place over the last 9-10 years. But today we're 250 million ARR, 400 staff globally. We're profitable, we're growing 2x year on year. So we're good candidates for an IPO in about a year or two, when we're kind of above that 500 million mark, which is nice. And yeah, it's been a like insane, being 24, 1 year work experience to running a multi-billion pound company with hundreds of staff is it's a crazy thing to do in your 20s.
That's a wild decade, yeah. I was going to ask about that as well, because you said you worked as a computer scientist for a year.
Yeah.
And then you found this problem and you really wanted to act on it.
Yeah.
How was that? Like, you're only a year into your career. I think after a year of being in my career, if I just said, okay, we need to completely change things, upend it, do this, only have a year of experience, were people on board? Did you have to convince people? Or like, how did you take that idea and that like ambitious go-getter attitude, I guess, and put it into...
I think founders are all wired like slightly differently to the general population, if I'm really honest. So I remember at the time, I think a great trait or like tell if you should be a founder is if you're working in a successful kind of company and you think you can run the company better than the CEO at 23 after my master's, whatever it was. I was very, I thought I was exceptional. I thought I was amazing. I thought I could be the CEO. I thought I'd run the company better. The company eventually went bust. So I probably would have done a better job if I'm really honest. Yeah. But I knew I wanted to do bigger and better things. And my two paths were to do my PhD at UCL, and I was applying to do a PhD in recommender systems with a great professor there, or it was to join Entrepreneur First and try and start a company. Back in those days, like starting a company in London was still fairly weird. Like venture capital was pretty unknown. I had no idea how you raise money, any of these things. But I saw this kind of amazing program, and some of my my machine learning kind of cohort had actually been through the program in the previous years. And when I looked at Entrepreneur First and the people going through that cohort, they were all these fantastic people. So I was like, I just want to be around the smartest, most ambitious people. And I thought like both those avenues were really interesting. And I ended up getting sold by Matt Clifford to join Entrepreneur First over a beer in this weird pub in Bermondsey, which I'll always remember. He probably won't remember. But got sold to do that, and then off to the races.
Mm-hmm. How did you set up meeting with Matt in the pub? Was it just a chance encounter? Or I actually was just writing about chance encounters right before this, so it's interesting to hear you say that.
There's always these moments in your life, right, where like something happens that completely changes everything.
Yeah.
I've had I look back over like the decades, and there's so many of those kind of pivotal moments that changed everything. But my like chance encounter of that story is Zoe, who was the head of talent at Entrepreneur First, had invited me to a dinner, which had, I think, Saranga, the Boulderton partner, and it had a couple of the ex-EF cohort members as like a panel. And then we were going to have a dinner afterwards, and Alice was there and a few of the ex-founders. And I was sat next to a guy called Tim, who was the founder of Primitive, really smart guy, really amazing. And Alice was like down the table one, and I kind of like pitched the problem to Tim, and Tim's like, dude, you got to start a company, you got to do this. And then Alice is like, is he good enough to be a founder? Should he be a founder? Like just in a little moment. And Tim's like, yeah, he should be a founder. And then I didn't want to join because they paid you, I think, £1,300 a month at the start. Like you got absolutely nothing. It was no longer like the YC 500k equity story. It was very little. And Matt did a very good sales job on me to try and get me to join EF. I was definitely like the best thing, or the best moment, or the best like decision I've ever made, for sure.
No, it's very interesting. And speaking of YC, I saw the other day that they put out a call for something very similar to Cleo, and I think it was you that posted and said, got some competition coming up. Yeah. So 10 years ago, you had this idea, and maybe this is also the time to talk about how Cleo works, because obviously I've tried using it in the past few weeks and I can't because I'm here, even though I was like, oh, could I put the state I'm from and like try it that way? But how is it to kind of be so ahead of your time in a way, or like have these people come up with this idea that you were trying to champion back then? And obviously it's worked, but
for context, it's conversational AI. So it's very much like ChatGPT for your money, a long time for ChatGPT. It was a complete accident, to be honest. So machine learning was like my idée fixe and had been through university and being a data scientist, and like machine learning was everything, and data was everything. So I knew the financial data was like incredibly valuable. And the first version of the app was built for a data scientist. So it was graphs, it was stats, it was machine learning, it predicts when I'd run out of money, it had all this fancy stuff. No one would sign up. My girlfriend at the time wouldn't sign up. My friends wouldn't sign up. My mum wouldn't sign up. No one would sign up. But I had this one little feature, which was pinging me and kind of harassing me when I was running out of money. And it was stupid. It was like an SMS. It predicts I was running out of money and go like, you spent like 7 times on delivery this week. You're an idiot. Like, just chill out. My friend saw that and he was like, dude, you should just build that. Like, that's funny. No one wants to open their banking app. Like, just make it fun. And that was actually like a really aha moment for me. I was like, he's kind of right. And I built this demo where I had my laptop with iMessage, I had my phone, and I had this beautiful conversation back and forth with Cleo, which was completely fake. There was no machine learning at all. And there wasn't for a while. And it was this really rich and deep conversation where Cleo understood everything about me. She understood like my goals, my needs, my wants, my financial picture. She had this like very rich understanding, like just a friend would, or like a really super intelligent AI, that context, that memory. And she was able in this conversation to like tell me what to do about my money. And I put that on a landing page. It was literally one fold of a landing page, and it was the little demo, meet Cleo, your intelligent AI assistant. And instantly that took off. Like the waiting list went through the roof, like instantly everyone wanted to sign up. And as I started letting people into Cleo, as I'd like built a little bit of machine learning, but not a lot, it was truly fascinating to see like the human product market fit with talking to an AI. People, I don't know if you ever remember Smarter Child and MSN back in the day, might predate you, but people like genuinely want to talk to these AIs. And I really kind of understood the inherent product market fit just looking through those conversations. We had this Facebook Messenger at the time. And every week it would get faster and faster, the admin panel. Like at the start, it's like 1-2 conversation every like minute or two. Then it was like, oh, you see them every second. And then it was like, do you know if you've seen a celebrity's notification feed when they've just like blown up?
Yeah.
It became that. And I was like, oh my God, this is like truly something. So we just doubled down on that. The first 4 years of the business was building this AI system, building a Facebook Messenger. And that was, our office is actually like literally, you can basically see our old apartment and office over there. And yeah, that was like a great kind of, it was very lucky, but like obviously we've ridden the wave, and now you've had LMs, and I always knew NLP would become this big thing because the research output was there. But even myself, I probably couldn't have like imagined how close to AGI would become in such a short period of time.
And then on the topic of, I guess, timing, and a lot of people I think get caught up on finding the right moment, the right time, it could boil down to the right day, the right second, the right meeting you have. Is there such a thing as being too early or too late?
That definitely, you could argue Cleo was too early in a lot of ways. Like we had a moment of like there's always these hype peaks. So you have like the Gartner hype cycle, and we were the first kind of hype cycle bots, Emerson Messenger, like we were kind of there, and then it died, and then everyone's like, why are you building an AI assistant? This is stupid. All the VCs are like, this is a gimmick, this is a fad, no one's ever gonna like, it's never gonna get intelligent enough, etc., etc. So you can be too early, but I think the most important thing for a founder is like, do you have like the founder market fit? Do you have the founder idea fit? And if you find a problem so big in the world, you're like, it annoys you and it like burns at you, that's like such a good sign to go start a business. Don't do what the MBAs do. And the MBAs like look at market trends, see what's hot, and then they try and jump on the trend when they have no kind of purpose, need, want to be there. I think you really got to kind of have lived and breathed and experienced that problem either yourself or in industry before trying to go fix it. And I'm like pretty agnostic. Like I angel invest a lot now, and I will fund people that are like 40, 50. Not seen a 60-year-old founder yet, but
Really?
not yet.
Yeah.
But I will also fund like 18-year-olds just out of college, and yeah. I think there's very interesting things in how big the companies they'll build are, and I think the risk profile is very different. But I think you can be a founder at any age.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And like, I guess going back on that point you had about founders are sometimes just wired differently. They feel like they can just run a company right out of university. And some people I think would say that just means they're ahead of themselves. If you went to like someone who's been in it for 20 years and be like, I could do this differently, and you're 19, they'd probably say, no, you can't. But sometimes maybe it's not the experience, it's just the ambition that they have to put that forward.
There's like really interesting, there's like a little bit of academic research on like what makes an entrepreneur and what makes a founder, like some interesting stuff out of Stanford. And like megalomania is like the common trait. Like people that think they can change the world. And I do think you have to have a little bit of megalomania to be a founder. Like genuinely, like doing what a founder does and creating something from zero, especially when you're no one. If you're 40, successful, already rich, had success, it's much more rational and normal because you can raise funding easy, you know how to run a team, you know how to build a business. Like that's quite logical. But if you're going to be a founder in your 20s, you actually need a little bit of like radical self-belief, and you need to be able to push through so many walls and do so many things that I think you just have to be wired slightly differently to the normal person.
Do you think you can learn that trait though?
There's like I think it's Grit by Carol Ducksworth. I think there's like the mentality of like yes and I can do this, and like I can, is it innate? Like, do you have that talent innately, or can you learn and do? And I do think like you learn every year of your life, right? In every minute of life, you're learning, you're getting better, and so I definitely think you can develop that. But if you look at the most successful founders of all time and you look at like the backgrounds they've come from, there's always a little bit of adversity there. Like whether it's the immigrant founder, whether it's the founder that came from X, Y, or Z, the founders that have like were born incredibly wealthy, they were very, very well taken care of, had the best education. They can be some of the top academic performers. And I saw this at EF actually. EF hired or like had a lot of highly academic, very smart people in the cohort. It was generally just all Oxbridge graduates in reality. And there was a very big difference between the ones that were kind of, you knew they were wealthy and you knew that they'd come from money, and the ones that hadn't. And I do think like a little bit of that that struggle, that grit, like does help you, because the biggest thing that stops these companies in reality is not their inability to raise funding or get product market fit or whatever it is. The biggest reason startups in the early stages fail is the founder gives up. The founder's like, this is too hard. This is insane. Like, I may as well just go work for Google or Meta and have like a very chilled life. And it's a very rational thing to do. The ones that actually persevere are the ones that, in times where it's completely irrational, where they're paying themselves like 25K a year, where they're like getting hammered every day and no one wants to give them money, somehow find a way to push through. So I do think like a little bit of inherent, like, you've seen struggle and adversity in life is useful. But you got to caveat all this, don't you? Like, there's like obviously massively successful people that came from Eton and have done amazing things. So, it's interesting though.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I mean, other than your first year out of university and in the 9 to 5 working life,
Yeah.
are there any early entrepreneurial spirit signs that you remember, like even as a kid? Because sometimes I can sense it even with like, friends' children or like my cousins or something, and they're like doing something at the age of 10. And I'm like, why are you doing that? Like, where is your head going? And they're like, oh, we could do this and this. And they're quite innovative at a young age.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious if you felt like that innate feeling of.
Yes. I think, I grew up in Sheffield, went to a state school, and I don't know, around like 15, 16, you realize you kind of need money, and you realize you need real people money. So like, there's actually, as like a 16-year-old, not that many opportunities to make real money.
Real people money.
Yeah, like you're not going to,
Yeah.
like, no one wants to work for minimum wage and kind of do that. So I had entrepreneurial endeavors. I won't kind of disclose all of them, that from a young age I was trying to make money, or I was like, I was like, I'm going to be successful. Did things differently, or I was very unafraid to break the rules. Maybe
Thinking outside the box.
Yeah, exactly.
But like even my friends and I would like buy 12 packs of soda.
Yeah.
Or pop. What if you're from Wisconsin, you would call it pop, obviously. Yeah. But we would just like sell it to our friends for $1 a can. And then Great for margins. What we just spent $4 on for like an entire case, we just made 12.
Yeah.
So there's your profit right there. But those are those like little signs that I think of when I think of like that young entrepreneurial spirit for it. But going back to, I guess, the start of Cleo, if you were to, well, there's 2 questions here, but if you were to launch it today, would you?
Yes. It's actually very into the YC thing. Like, literally, there's a call for conversational AI startups in personal finance. So it's like, we would be the hottest company in YC right now. Like, if I was at YC and I was going to demo day in 2 weeks, I think the demo day is in 2 weeks, I would raise more than my Series A valuation. I'd raise more money than I did at my Series A, and I'll be off to the races. This is an amazing moment to start a startup. If you can say AI for anything, if I look at all my angel investments, actually, it's AI for X, it's AI for X. And there's just going to be so much disruption and so many cool companies built in the next 10 years. There's never been a better time. As long as you're an AI founder. Don't do anything else. It has to be AI. But it's a really special moment.
Yeah. And if you launch, like, so going back 10 years ago, so not launching today, but launching back in 2016, would you have done anything differently then? Knowing now, I guess, the last 10 years of how things have worked.
100%. So we're a consumer company. That's quite different from a lot of, there's not actually that many consumer companies that get launched and are successful. A lot of companies you see in startups are B2B. And there's always kind of like prevailing logic in startups. And there's like a folklore. And the folklore of consumer was always like, you just build it, you get MAU, you get DAU, and then you monetize in like 5 years. And you do not think about revenue, you do not think about the business model. It's about building this killer product that has amazing retention, these amazing MAUs, and like that's the only thing you should focus on. And where this came from was ad business models. Like, you're gonna build Google, you add an ad model on it. You're gonna build Facebook, you're gonna add model. Like, it was always driven by the best consumer companies had just been ad businesses. So if you're not going to be an ad supported business, it's not the case for building a consumer company. You actually have to think about the business model, especially in something where there's actually cost of goods sold. So if you're in financial services, you're selling something and you're losing money every time. So in my Series B, I had this beautiful exponential weekly active user chart, 500,000 weekly active users, growing faster than Revolut, growing faster than anyone else. And it was beautiful. But COVID had just happened or was just happening, and WeWork and Uber had just crashed. So the meetings I went into went from what's your WAU, what's your retention, to what's your revenue, what's your unit economics. And I didn't have any of that. So the thing I would do going back is I would think about the business model way more deeply from the start. And I think that's the hardest thing to do as a 24-year-old as well. Like, you know nothing. Like, have you even seen a P&L before? Probably not. I don't think I had. Anyway, if you're building a B2C company, it's not an ad-supported business, please think about the business model right from day one and try and have revenue as your key metric, not just MAU, because you'll get into this situation where you then like, oh my God, like I've got to build this business again. And that's very, very challenging.
Mm-hmm. And on that point as well, I guess like when you're 24 and you're trying to pitch this idea, like you said, you would focus more on that. Was there any point that you had realized how much you have to pitch yourself? Because also going back on your point of like being a founder, there's something in a founder that makes them tick forward.
Yeah.
If your idea fails, you're still a founder. You're probably going to go on and do something else. You have that nature to you. And I sometimes find, speaking with founders as well myself, they don't big themselves up enough. And I'm like speaking to them and they get kind of bogged up in these numbers and like this thing. And I'm like, talk about you or what you did and you made it happen. And I'm just curious if that's something at the age of 24 that you're able to do if you don't have the experience, but trying to prove your self-worth without.
It would like the two things I always remember from EF and like talking to VCs at the time was like passion and ambition. Like the thing with European founders is they're inherently not as bullish. They're way more conservative. They aren't as ambitious and they aren't as like, they don't come across as passionate. And the way that manifested for me when I was pitching, and I'm sure the VCs that got my pitch at that time kind of remember, and like people still talk about it, is I was just incredibly passionate and I was incredibly ambitious. Like this was going to be a Google-sized company. So I'm 24, I've had a year's worth of work experience, and I remember telling Nicholas Stenstrom, I'm building a Google-sized company. Like, I think I dissed Skype accidentally, and I was like, I don't want to be Skype. I was like, I want to build a huge, ginormous Google-sized company, and that served me really well. Like passion, ambition. At the early stages is really important. And the best bit of fundraising advice I got was actually from Tom Blomfield at the time. He probably doesn't remember, but I went to see him in the Monzo early office. There was like 30 of them there, and I'm like showing him the landing page, and he's like, yeah, cool, whatever. Anyway, we're talking about fundraising, and he's like, the one thing you have to remember from this is, one, you show traction. So you have to show up and to the right, exponential graph, whether it's like wait lists, like whatever it is, you just have to show hype and you have to quickly show there's something here that's hot and interesting in the world, and you demo it by this, and this. The second bit, which is actually where like VCs should spend the most time talking about, is the strategic middle bit, which is like what's your go-to-market, what's the first product you launch, how do you expand, like what's the product going to look like in the early stages, all these things. He's like, gloss over that. Do not talk about any of like the near-term strategy or what you're going to do in the near term. Don't talk about how you're going to make money or acquire customers. He was just like, pitch the third bit, which is the vision, and tell everyone how you're going to build a Google-sized company. You can't say how you're going to be bigger than Google logically, coherently. You shouldn't be having a VC meeting. So I always just remember, like, even today, if I'm pitching a VC, it's like, here's the traction. Forget about the messy middle. I'm going to build a Google-sized company. And I think every single founder should take that as their kind of playbook for pitching. And I see them get it wrong all the time, like constantly.
Mm-hmm. Do you think some founders lack ambition, or do they lack the confidence to be ambitious?
It's just, in America, it's like inherently normal.
Mm-hmm. I mean, sometimes I talk to my friends and like, why are you asking me what my big dream is when we're just out for a pint? And I'm like, I don't know. But I understand. Yeah, so.
And like, especially in the, like, my friend's going through YC at the moment, and she's pitching in 2 weeks, and she's telling me like, just what's happening in the batch. And we just had like a forum, which is like a YPO, and we went into detail on it, and it's like so interesting. Just everyone is radically ambitious there, and like there's an inherent culture of like, you are going to do big things. So I think it is in the water, and it is in the locale and the people you're with. In London, go talk to your friends and about your startup idea. They will give you 20 excellent reasons why this is a terrible idea and you shouldn't do this. And they're really good at it, actually. It's like so easy to be a cynic. It's like so easy to be a critic of anything that you're doing. So inherently in Europe, we're always like meeker, weaker, less ambitious, where America, actually China, you look at China's like 100-year plan. They always have a plan for the next 50, 100 years. And if you look at their plan from like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and what they actually did, they execute on it really well. So say you've got two massive countries in the world, the global superpowers. They're radically ambitious. that have a level of innovation that is unheard of in Europe and are like just not constrained, like especially in China, they are not constrained in terms of level ambition, state support, whatever it is. So I think Europe has just missed a massive like ambition trap. And I think we're like stuck in the stagnation that we are because there is a lack of the most ambitious people building ginormous Google-sized companies. We're often like, we're going to build like the UK version of X, and that's never a good business. So I don't think America has a problem. I think Europe has a huge, huge gap, and like really needs to be sorted out.
I guess from my perspective, sometimes if I meet someone,
Yeah.
I can sense that they have that ambition, but they are genuinely just they're afraid to say it, or they don't want to just like tell someone they want. And maybe it's because of what they receive in feedback backwards, but like they might have the ambition to create a Google size startup. But then if they say that out loud, they don't want their 20 friends to tell them not to. So I think the ambition might be there, but I just question whether or not it's just a confidence issue
It's
too.
this the cultural norms. It's what's in
Yeah.
the water. It's how we even the VCs in Europe. VCs are supposed to be the most risk-on, ambitious people in the world, right? They're the people that are supposed to be investing in the next Larry, Sergey. And if you pitch European investors, even today, they're meek and weak. They are like genuinely like pretty unambitious and pretty risk off. But if you talk to a US VC and like they're your projections, like where's the next 10x? Like there's just such a gulf there, and I think it's coming. I think like enough capital, enough time, like the ecosystem develops and people start to learn the norms. But the Valley's just done that for like 20, 30, 40 years now, whereas we have barely done a decade, and we're only starting to now see the second generation companies. So I do think it's like changing slightly, but it's just changing so slowly. And there's this like massive risk we have in the UK of people just leaving for America, either to raise more capital or just to start their business there. And I think if Europe can't get innovation right, like it's just done as a continent. Like the stagnation will not support social safety nets. It will not support the government in any way, shape, or form. So if it can't get innovation, it can't start building these like ginormous outlier companies. It's like Europe is just done, and the UK is just done. I always say Europe and the UK in the same breath because I do think of us in the European Union, but we're not. But yeah, like I think it's a European problem. It's not a Valley problem at all.
So you moved Cleo to the US, and I'm sure there was a lot of reasons that went into why you did that. But what is this ambitious like culture? The reason you did it? Why do you think it did so well? I guess what was that whole decision process looking like?
If you want to build a Google, it's like a very rational argument for me and very logical. It's like, okay, if you want to build a Google-sized company, you're going to need a massive TAM and lots of users. Where's the biggest market in the world? The US. Where are the best startups in the world? The US. If you're going to win and you're going to win globally, you have to win in the US. So like I inherently knew I had to win in the US and win globally, and I'd had a few like great angels at the start of Cleo who were like hyper ambitious, like Nicholas Zenstrom and Tabit, and they were always global, which really helped me as like a 24-year-old in London. So it was just natural for me to launch and try and win and be the best in America. And I'm not the best still, but I'm working at being the best.
Until all these YC startups come out in the next few years.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is there any reason that you decided to stay based here yourself, though, in the UK?
I was actually going to move at the start of COVID. So I was just getting my visa. I was going to move to New York. I was very excited. COVID happened. Everything got locked down. And like, just because of COVID and like travel and how that all played out, I didn't end up moving in the end, and I ended up spending time. And then you get kind of financially trapped as well. So in California, capital gains is you got the federal, which is like 20%. You've got another 18 or what more on top of it. So in the UK, it was 20%. Now it's been raised to 24, and we'll see what happens with it. But once you have enough, once your company's worth a certain valuation, like that extra 20% capital gains is, you're getting into like hundreds of millions to territory. So it does become like a tax equation for you as well. And probably like one of the biggest advantages the UK has is like lower capital gains in San Francisco. But when you're still like a Series A or a Series B company, you haven't made it yet, like you're not even thinking about that. It's only when you've like been able to sell secondary and have like a big valuation that actually becomes part of the calculus. So honestly, like I would be in the US now if it wasn't for COVID. And the reason I'm not just in San Francisco now is because I'm just seeing how the UK is going, and I'm like, I really feel like I can have an impact and I can fix it. And I would love to, build a $100 billion company, HQ'd in the UK, pay tax in the UK, hire people in the UK, and I would love eventually, to be that publicly listed company that is like chartered that success. I think Europe can turn it around. I think it's really important for Europe as well. I think it's really important for Western society to have a strong innovation economy in Europe that's growing and economies that are growing. Because if you just have the US with no allies, it becomes a very bipolar world and a very dangerous world. So I think a strong Europe is really good for Western democracy. And it really scares me, kind of like the trajectory we're heading. It's a little bit out there, but I'm like genuinely worried about it. And I think I can have an impact in the UK to turn that around.
That's good. That's kind of an optimistic outview, wouldn't you say? Of keeping your roots here, having Cleo in the US, trying to champion what's possible.
I think you can build a $1 trillion company. There's, especially in this day and age, there's no reason a British or French or German founder can't build a $1 trillion company in Europe today. And I think we need those kind of ambitious founders and those ambitious companies to like set the way and lead things. And it's just so, if you look at the economy of Europe and like how it's made up, it is made up of like centuries old banking, legacy, oil, gas industries. And because their revenues aren't growing, taxation isn't growing, GDP isn't growing. If you look at the US, all of the biggest market cap companies' revenue is growing like tremendously, which drives GDP, which drives taxation, which drives their economy and drives prosperity there. And if you don't have innovation, if you don't have companies that are growing at a really big clip at scale, like it will just continue to stagnate. And if the economy keeps stagnating, we're not going to be able to fund the NHS. We're not going to be able to pay for social security and benefits. And there's terrible things that will happen in Europe if we don't turn this around. So I'm just like, I'm looking at like the 10, 20 year view and I'm like, this is bad. We need to fix it. And maybe it's a little bit megalomaniac to think I can be the one that can fix it, but we'll go there.
Yeah, but I guess wouldn't you say that sometimes during the hardest of times, some of the most greatest of innovation happens to try to fix it? It's just like yourself trying to say maybe you're a bit ahead of yourself saying you're going to be the one to fix it, but a lot of founders are. They look on I don't know if it's the bright side, but they look on the opposite side of things and they see this very like bleak outlook, this like scary tech 10 years, 20 years. And instead of saying we're all screwed, they try to do something about it.
100%. Yeah. And if you look at, I'm trying to rationalize it in my head, like if you look at all the generational companies that have been founded, they have largely been founded in downturns.
Yeah.
So they haven't been founded at the peak of the hype cycle when like life is good and everything is kind of hypey. They're generally founded in periods where there's like low capital availability, and such you can get a monopoly and you don't have that much competition and you can grow really tremendously well. And even you look at like technology advancements and innovation, like from nuclear and World War II and just everything that came out of DARPA and ARPA and all these kind of things, they do generally come out of like big societal issues and big societal governmental problems. So I would definitely, like, you need optimists in the world. You need people that are building things and changing things. Otherwise, we're just a bunch of moany Brits over here on our shitty island complaining about things. So we don't want to be that.
Yeah. No, I think it's just someone said this to me a while back, and it's always stuck with me, is that the world is full of problems. But with that, it just means the world is full of opportunities. But that's kind of just like the nature of being a founder as well, is you find this problem that you've experienced and you cannot stand. You can't do it. You just can't do anything about it. So you just try to do something about it. And maybe that's just what fascinates me about startups and founders in general.
I think there's a really visceral thing there where you see a problem and you get viscerally annoyed at it.
Yeah.
Like today in this NHS counter fraud stuff, they were telling me like what the GPs are doing. They were just telling me about this fraud that was happening, and it was like I was like getting
annoyed.
I was just getting so annoyed, like banging my hand on the table.
Yeah.
and because they're in it for 20 years, it's just kind of like blasé to them, and they know it. And I think the people that do actually make a big change, and the founders, are the ones that get pissed off by problems and then go want to solve them. I think they are the people in the world that do actually make an impact and do change things. I'm not saying like everyone else doesn't make an impact, but there's generally, if you look at human innovation, like it is like a fairly small cohort of people that have like moved the world forward in like dramatic ways. You do need those people in society, and I do think if you look at history, it is a small cohort that has driven a tremendous amount of change.
The outliers of the world, really, though. Is there anyone, and I guess that's a good question too, is there any one entrepreneur, any one outlier that you've always looked up to, I guess, in the past 10 years? Or your entire life?
Definitely don't see Elon Musk, don't see that. I'm joking. To be honest, not really. I think there's historical figures that have done amazing things as presidents or prime ministers or leaders of countries. There's a lot of individuals. I don't think there's like any one individual that I've like idolized and think is amazing. But it's all of them. It's like the collective history of like innovation and progress has come from, I don't know, 1,000 people, 100 people. Like it's not that big. It's probably way more than that, actually. Probably 10,000 people will go there. But it's a fairly small cohort that's had a disproportionate impact on society and life, and for the better if we look at history.
No, it's interesting. I think sometimes when I ask people that question, it's always like the basics.
Steve Jobs,
Bill Gates. I don't know. There's always these different types of where it's like, okay, but then what? Some people, when some people tell me, it's just like, I don't know, my dad or my mom or someone that they looked up to because it was like they felt that entrepreneurial spirit in some way. I am curious as to how you've handled growth with Cleo. So you mentioned a lot of growth stats earlier on in this conversation, and 400 staff globally. Is that what? Yeah. How do you manage something that was just once a seed of an idea, something that you really wanted to start and change, to now being able to manage a team, to be able to manage these expectations, and how do you just deal with that pressure as things grow?
Yeah, people always talk about this, and I think it is very correct, but they are these stages, and you can kind of like, you can put a number on them almost. It's like the first 10 people, the first 30, the first 100, the first 4. They are these different stages of being a CEO, and your job is radically different, like so different in every stage that it kind of blows your mind, and you have to like quickly understand that, quickly adjust all your ways of working, quickly understand like what best practices are, how to run an org, all these kind of things. And different founders are also suited to different stages more so than others. And if you're going to be a successful long-term founder, you have to really grow with it. So, the thing I always say to founders coming up, like the thing that's going to be the hardest is not going to be like building the product, like the product strategy, the company strategy, raising money. It's not going to be like the code. It's not going to be like acquiring customers, any of that. The hardest thing about building an organization is getting hundreds of people to do the thing that you want them to do at a high velocity and be happy and like want to do it and all row in the same direction and be hyped up about it. And it's fantastically hard. And we're only talking about an organization that's 400 people. It's tiny in the scheme of things. I don't know, like Google was very like 50,000, maybe more. Like they are different operating systems and different ways of working in each of them, and you have to master them. The one like coherent thread through it all though is just like from being like your high school, captain of a football team, whatever it is, to like leading a team. It's the same thing. It's like you need to give people energy, you need to get people excited, you need to get them bought into the mission, you need to build enthusiasm and camaraderie and relationships. And those same skill sets of you being like the captain of this thing or the leader of this little thing when you're in school to actually building a massive organization, like it's like quite inherent. And I think a lot of people like either have it or they don't. In a way, you can learn it, get better at it. But I think that kind of conviction, ability to convince people, ability to motivate people is the hardest thing. It's the hardest thing to do at scale. People are the messiest. Making them effective is the hardest thing. Everything else is secondary. And if you're like really analytical and logical, you'll figure all that out. And it's pretty, you don't even need to be that smart to like do all the rest of it. but you need like massive EQ and IQ to try and get lots of people to do the same thing. And it's no one is born you like no one is born perfectly at it. Like you do have to put a lot of time and effort into it. So I was more analytical, so I'd probably say I wasn't like the natural leader on the people front, but I've like got very good at it over time, I think. Debatable with my staff. Yeah, right. But yeah, that's probably the interesting thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I guess when it grows, and if it quickly grows over time, and you also, it was like 50 to 200 people and 400 people, like those are growing pains in of itself. And I was listening to a podcast the other day about actually Steve Jobs, about how much he was like championing the art of simplicity and like everything. So product design, marketing, advertising, and also communication. So I'm curious as to what you think about whether or not there's been a time that you accidentally overcomplicated things, or if you've had to keep that like simplicity in mind when you're growing, be direct, be communicative, be simple, not overcomplicate things. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm very direct and very transparent, and I try and keep things very efficient. I would say though, there are different ways of building a company, and I think Apple is this extreme outlier of like its hardware. You got to be really kind of thoughtful about the quality and what you ship before you ship. You've got to be like, everything has to be so simple and perfect, and hardware just has this inherent cycle. If you're building like an airplane, you've got to build it perfectly because you're going to kill people.
Yeah.
If you're building a B2C product that's like kind of weird and out there for like Gen Z millennials, like don't build it like Apple, like build it in a very fast, innovative way. So I think there's multiple ways to be successful as like in a company inherently, and it depends on like what you're trying to do and how you're wired. And I think a different CEO could have been successful at Cleo in a completely different way. But you've kind of got to like make that choice and then make sure everyone in the organization is bought into it. Some people can't think you're Apple when you're actually like doing Cleo, and it's very, very different. Everyone has to understand like we're going to ship stuff, we're going to do tests, we're going to like learn from our customers very, very quickly. So I think B2C products, having lots of bets, having like complexity does come from like doing lots of things, seeing what works, learning with customers. It's like the best way to build a B2C product. It is probably like the complete inverse of how you build a spaceship. If I built a spaceship, you would not want to get in it. It would blow apart very quickly. But
like one of those ones that you would build in school for like your race down the river or something.
Exactly, and it would not go well for anyone. So yeah.
No, it's interesting.
We're very different, but
yeah, I think some people might say like Steve Jobs was a simple man. Some people might say that founders are just simple people, but I would say it's quite subjective depending on it. Like it depends on the business, it depends on the person, it depends on what someone views as success in the first place.
I agree. I think the thing that they have in common is they have a taste. They have a view on the world that they want to impose on the world, for lack of a better word. Steve Jobs had an aesthetic, he had a point of view, he had taste, and everything that lives and breathes Apple is his taste. That office, he designed like the bathrooms in that crazy office. Like there's an kind of because it's your baby and it's your thing, it's like you're birthing into the world, so it's your taste that is going into the world. Steve Jobs probably had better taste than me, given Cleo in its design language at the moment. But I do think like the very best founders are so into the product, so into the details, so into like just everything about it, because it's their baby, and they've spent 10, 20 years, 30 years doing it. So like there's a common thread that these people are way too controlling, way too opinionated, and really want to see their taste seen and loved in the world. And I think that is very different to how if all humans did that, you can imagine what the world would be like. We'd all be arguing with each other every 2 seconds. No one would do anything for anyone. It would be like absolute chaos. But you do need like a couple of these people that are going to like rally and push their view of the world forward. I think it's interesting.
Mm-hmm. And those qualities and characteristics, so I find it quite interesting that, you're talking about founders and you say they, but would you not lump yourself into those views and those tastes and those characteristics that you
Oh,
were just
I'm the obnoxious megalomaniac control freak that imposing his taste on the world. Yeah, that's how this podcast is going to go. Yeah, definitely. Like I've got a very strong point of like my point of view on the world is very simple. It's like they will be these agents. There will be these agents in every major domain of your life: health, wealth, education, you name it. That you're already seeing it today. Like I live my life with O3. Like I don't make a decision in my life without consulting O3.
Really?
Like genuinely use it hundreds and hundreds of times a day in like ways that most people don't. And I'm like an ultra power user of it, and I use it incredibly effectively and incredibly well, and it's made me like 10 times more effective. That agent will be in lots of domains in your life. You have multiple agents; they'll do different things for you. But I think the way the way that we're going to interact with computers through the next generations is just how it's kind of progressed from the last 40 years. 40 years ago, you had a mainframe, you sat at a terminal in a big building, you were attached to it, you were beholden to it, writing in like punch cards and like basic programming languages, and then you had like the PC, and it became like in your home a little bit more natural, and it was still like a little bit weird where it was command line. And then you had a GUI, which was like more natural and more human. Then you had networks, and you had the internet, and you had mobile, and just basic computing has evolved to be more and more human every bit of the evolution. And the ultimate instantiation of this is just like you have an agent. You don't even have a phone. Like you just talk, and the screens around you. You live your life, and there is just this very powerful assistant that can do immense amounts of things for you. That makes your life easier, simpler, so you can accumulate knowledge at a far faster rate, and you can just do what 100 people would have taken to get done before. So I am just so bullish on this like one single idea of agents that everything I'm going to do in my life is going to be fulfilling that vision. And I'm either going to be right or I'm going to be wrong. And I think I'm looking like I'm going to be right these days. So I think it's probably the right kind of vector to go on. And if I'm right, then there'll be these like bigger than Google companies in each of these spaces, and I hope Cleo is one of them in financial services, and it'll do masses for society. It'll change how people view their money, live with their money. It'll change income inequality. It'll change like the number of people that have savings and people living paycheck to paycheck. It will fundamentally reshape all of society in so many important ways. I don't know if you've used like I've used O3 for health stuff recently, and it blows my mind how much information and how useful it is and how much I can learn from it so quickly. And we're like 2 years into this. Like it's such early innings in AI. I'm obviously like very biased and drunk a lot of my own Kool-Aid on this, but I genuinely think this is like how the world will change. And if I'm going to spend my time doing anything, why wouldn't I try and tackle society's biggest problems with the most interesting and relevant, important technology of my lifetime? So good time to start a company, basically.
Yeah.
TLDR.
Well, that actually was going to lead me to one of my final questions, which I could probably assume what your answer would be to it. But if there was someone today or tomorrow who was 18, just out of high school, 24, just out of college, university, whoever's listening to this, depending on how you call it, or even 40 and wanting to just like break that traditional path of their corporate career, what would your advice be to them to start, to find the idea, to get going? I mean,
just goddamn do it. Like, you just have to jump in these things. And what a lot of people do is they try and do what you're saying, which is have the perfect idea, have the perfect moment, have the perfect business plan, have lined it all up and thought about it. And it's this like failure to launch mode a lot of times. I just went through this. It was a good outcome with a really good friend of mine, and her background is like stunning, like double first in PPE from Oxford. Like she ticked every goddamn box that you can ever tick in your life, and she's very, very successful. But you could see her as she was starting to think about starting a startup, and she's radically ambitious and all these kind of stuff. But it was like the McKinsey consultant in her there was a delay to launch, and it was just like I was pushing and pushing and pushing. And she's amazing, fantastic, and she launched and she raised loads of money and she's doing amazing things. But I think people that are very tracked and very successful have they feel like they've got more to lose. So if you're on a 300k salary at Google, you've got more to lose than the 24-year-old that's just gone out of college. And I think it's really important for society that that person on 300k at Google or in private equity or in an investment bank or, you know, or you name it, like they should also be starting companies. Like the best and brightest in society shouldn't get locked into these traps of wealth accumulation, being a lawyer, being PE, because that's where all the money is made generally. If you come out of these top institutions, you'll go into hedge fund, PE, lawyer, and you'll try and make a ton of money. And then they are actually like a lot of the smartest, brightest, most ambitious people in the world. And they get trapped in these zero sum, like negative sum games where they may accumulate 10 million at the end of their career or 20 million, whatever it is. They'll work incredibly hard, but they'll have no impact on society. They won't move the ball forward at all. They'll look back and be like, that was like a grind and horrible. Did I do anything good for humanity? And like the answer is like largely no. And I think that we have this huge glut of people, both in the US and the UK and across Europe, where they get trapped in these moments and they should be founders and they should start companies. So if anyone is one of those people, like just take a year and just go do it. Like your CV is actually better having started a company versus like missing that year at Google, missing that year in PE. Like just go do it. And yeah, like if you're gonna make real wealth as well and you're gonna like really accumulate power and wealth, the only like meaningful way to get to like hundreds of millions, billions is actually not PE or being a lawyer. You're gonna get to like 10 million, whatever it is. If you want to change the world and have a huge amount of wealth and power, which sounds crazy again, you have to build a startup and you have to own equity in a highly appreciating asset. So for the most ambitious people in the world, I think getting to that multi-billion status, building a generational company, and then being able to use that to do great things in society, I think is the way to live your life in the most interesting way as well. You may as well try.
Just try. That's good advice. And that said, unfortunately we are out of time, but I think that advice, just try, just do it, and maybe not live on regrets is a good thing to end on.
Good note. Love it. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Barney. It was a good one.